Hi, and thank you for joining me today. As you can see, I am not alone. I have an incredibly special guest with me to talk about an incredibly important topic that is on the minds of everyone. It is a global story. We're talking about what happened in Uvalde, Texas, a few days ago when an 18-year-old shooter walked in, killing 21 people, 19 of whom young children, elementary school students, two adults. Everybody has a broken heart. Everybody is discussing this. Everybody is talking about ways to fix this. And I wanted to loop in my friend Rania Mankarius. Rania has been the head of Crime Stoppers here in Houston as the CEO for many, many years now. She created the first ever Crime Stoppers Safe School Institute. We're going to talk about that. She is so involved when it comes to safety in general and empowering people in communities to make communities a safer place. Because I think the important thing here, Rania, is that a lot of people feel very helpless unless they're in the polls, unless they're voting, unless they're doing something to basically institute policy change. But I want to really impress upon my audience is that there is something we can do right now in our communities. And first of all, I'm so happy that you're here with me today and that we're talking about this.
I am so happy to be with you. I thank you for inviting me to discuss this with you. It's a passion of mine. It's a passion of our organization, and it's an honor to be speaking about it with you. I'm thrilled. Thank you.
Thank you, Rania. Thank you. I know that you launched your organization's first webinar series with local, statewide, national experts, as well as Parents Against Crime. This is a story that has impacted us as parents. It is a dialogue that we're having with our children. And I'm going to share a dialogue that I had with my son not long ago. But I want you to talk about what you do at Crime Stoppers and how we as people can get better involved in our communities to help prevent crimes like these.
So, Crime Stoppers is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to solve and prevent crime, and we do it in partnership with Citizens Media and the criminal justice system. And there are Crime Stoppers in every major city across the country, and 1,700 spanning 32 countries, actually. Houston's is the largest, and I think it's the largest because of our city. You know, our media is so wonderful, our law enforcement so active, our community is very engaged, and we're a
Yes.
community that's driven to solutions. And so what does that look like? We obviously solve crime through our tip line, and everyone's
Right.
heard of this tip line, but we believe in crime prevention through education. So we're in the communities, we're studying crime trends, and we're offering solutions. We're also in the schools. Dominique, we've been in the school since 1997, well before school safety was a national hot topic. We were boots on the ground in middle schools and high schools, talking, listening, studying, offering our tip line, understanding that kids, the students, are usually the first line of intelligence. They
Yes.
know if there's going to be a gang fight, if someone's going to bring a weapon to school. They know when there's internal conflict brewing. And so we need to tap into that. We need to give them a tool to share it. After the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary, we realized that we needed to expand the program, and we started going into kindergarten classes. Now, we weren't talking about shootings or tip line, but we were talking to kids about what does it mean to be a good citizen? What does it mean to be a good friend, a good neighbor? How do you take care of your classroom, your community? And those conversations build through time. So now we have the largest Safe School Institute. We're in kindergarten to 12th grade. We're training kids in Houston, across Texas, and actually across the country on every crime trend and issue you can think of, and giving kids these tools proactively to keep themselves safe. We also train the teachers, we train the administration, school-based law enforcement, and the parents, because we believe that they need to be part of the conversation too.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk, Rania, about what happened at this particular school on May 24th. Salvador Ramos was able to get in, break through a barrier, get into an unlocked door in that school, and basically was able to shoot and do what he did. It took a long time for law enforcement to be able to react. And so it seemed that there in that community was a breakdown of
Mhm.
what needed to happen. And students, you hear stories of some students who were playing dead, but in a situation like that where you have somebody who is armed the way that person was and able to get in without being taken down from the get-go, that's a problem that really needs to be addressed in schools. There's got to be some kind of plan, strategy, and system in place to handle. And it's sad we have to even think that way,
I
but
know.
it is
No.
what it is. And you can't turn a blind eye to it. So talk to me about some of these strategies that you're implementing in schools.
And Dominique, what's so important about what you said, it made me think, if you listen to the conversations or the interviews following the shooting in Uvalde, so many families said, or community members said, we never thought this could happen here. Even elected officials that represent the area say, we never thought this would happen here. And what we're trying to do is say, we want everyone to think it can happen here where I live, where my kids go to elementary school, middle school, high school. I don't want to hear it's the best private school. I don't want to hear that it's a close knit community. None of that matters, because there's always the potential for an outlier. And there's always the option for that outlier to gain access to any one of our children's schools and create the damage that we just all witnessed. So what does that mean?
Mm.
It means we need every community member to get engaged in what the actual process is. So at Crime Stoppers, we say, what is the schools? What are the policies and procedures?
Mhm.
And mom, dad, whoever the caretakers are, do you know what they are? Do you know? I'm a mom of three. I'll tell you, it's hard at the start of the year. You're getting handbooks and sign this and
Yeah.
waivers. I sometimes say, okay, I'll read the parent handbook later. I'm sure I don't need any of this stuff right now. I want every one of us, and we encourage people to stop and read the material. Understand how your school handles threats. How do they investigate them?
Mhm.
What type of information will be communicated to you, the parents? There's a lot of privacy laws when you're dealing with minors. You may not get all the information you want, but if you can dig in early and have an understanding that, well, threats are always taken seriously. This is the person in the school that monitors threats. When they get a threat, they talk to the local district or FBI, depending on what the threat is, and they investigate it. It might give families peace of mind, or it might uncover gaps in the system.
Correct.
Similarly, with an active shooter, what is the school's policy? What law enforcement agency responds? And what is the gap? How long do they respond? Do they have an up to date map of the school?
Mhm.
We've seen this in school shootings where the law enforcement arrives and they'll pull blueprints of the school and they'll say,
Sure.
this is outdated.
Yeah,
The
because
school,
the schools have been upgraded and there's
yeah,
no new mapping of it.
exactly. And so law enforcement's trying to figure out, well, this says library, but we're getting a note that the shooter's in the gym. We
Mm.
need to clear all, and that doesn't take money. It's just time. It's just asking questions and connecting dots. We need parents to engage. And then the third thing we do is we say, what is the school spending on security, and what do we want to see? Some schools would like police presence, other schools do not want police presence, but all schools want to be safe. And
Mm.
some schools, when you have a school that's 40 or 50 years old and you can literally throw a rock through a window, that's a problem in today's community and in today's culture. So parents, what are you willing to pull money together, create an endowment, to go ahead and decide to layer a few windows so that bullets or objects can't break through? Dominique, these are important topics that we can do today.
Mhm.
Even with the start of summer for some of us, it doesn't mean this conversation's on hold. Actually,
It's an
it's a
opportunity.
wonderful, yes, dig in now. Dig
Mhm.
in now and do the research and the reading.
Yeah, this is a hotly politicized topic, and it has been for a very long time about gun control, gun legislation, gun safety, what age, what weaponry, all of that. You know, we talked before this interview started about that and about politicizing this issue. And you had some interesting comments. And by the way, this conversation is not about that. This is not a political conversation. And there's a reason why. And I want you to elaborate, Rania.
I am blessed to know two of the families who lost their daughters during the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Michelle Gay and Alyssa Parker co-founded Safe and Sound Schools, and I'm on the advisory board. I've been blessed to know them and work with them for many years. And in talking to two families that paid the ultimate price, the ultimate sacrifice of losing their little girls that day, they've walked me through what the day looked like and what the aftermath was like. And that fire fueled political rhetoric actually does not bring comfort to families in mourning. To some families, it feels like an opportunity for sound bites, airtime, and political points, when all of us know that through the course of history, you've had one side fully run the House and Senate, you've had the other side. We need to turn the dial down. Yes, every sector should get to work on a solution. If you're serving in your state or federal government, we thank you for that service and we ask you to work on these issues. But to make that a hot topic, it hurts some of these families. It really, really does. Families want comfort. They want solutions. They want to know it will never happen again. They want to know that their children didn't die in vain. And they appreciate groups that have been working on public safety the day before the shooting took place, and groups that will continue working on it when the news cycle passes.
Yeah. You know, I had an interesting talk with my son who's 17, and we talked about this shooting. And I asked him, I said, you know, what's going on? Why do you think these things are happening? I said, it's, you know, is it cultural? Is it the exposure to gaming? Is it, you know, access? What is it? And, you know, he was so quick in his answer. And he said, Mom, I really think it's how things are functioning in the home. I
Mm.
really think it has a lot to do with dysfunction at the home and how the person is feeling, which then ties into, of course, emotional health, mental health, and all of that. And so there's that dynamic. And, you know, when you look at some of the backgrounds of these children or young people who are involved in violence, you can point to a history of disturbed backgrounds, of instability, of imbalance. And so, you know, how can we reach families and children who are coming from environments like this of broken homes, of broken hearts, of not feeling secured, nurtured, cared for? And a lot of times these children are raising themselves and they're doing so on
Yep.
beats, right?
Mhm.
How do
Mhm.
we intercept and get to these kids and get into their heads before things like this can happen?
Well, that brings me to another topic that's very near to, and dear to me. It's how our kids are being raised in the digital space. And I
Yes.
recently released a book on this that you know, the online world, what you think you know and what you don't. And in it, I dive into the mental health. Your son has hit the nail on the head, literally. The dynamics between a child and their family today,
Mhm.
the self-hatred that we're seeing, the overwhelming number, the skyrocketing statistics of self-hatred that we're seeing in the younger and our younger adolescents,
Yes.
the desire for fame and
Mhm.
to be seen and to know that they can accomplish that through a final act.
Yes.
These kids are becoming suicidal and homicidal. They're
Mhm.
thinking, I want to die. I am frustrated. I am angry. I have no hope. I have nowhere to go. But I want to die in a way that makes me famous. That
Infamous.
Yes, infamous. And so there's been fascinating studies on this. And there were common threads, and I pulled them before we spoke, between all this, not all, a majority of the school shooters. One, Usually a lone gunman, with the exception of very few, usually a male figure, usually around the age of 18 or the late teen years. They've usually submitted a manifesto of some
Mhm.
point, outlining their frustration, their anger, which, by the way, for the rest of us, should also be known as a cry for
For
help,
help, 100%.
right? It's a cry for help. So that's where we need to all be stopping and looking. They usually have a connection of some sort to the target. So whether it's a school they went to or where a family member works, there is a connection to that specific target. We mentioned that they're suicidal turned homicidal, the fame, the notoriety, the self-hate and despair turned outward at the world. So what do we do now? What do we do? What we want people to do is to raise a generation that understands these issues, that says this is not that person's problem.
Mhm.
This is my problem too. When I see a colleague or a friend or maybe somebody I don't even know at school that seems isolated, I'm not going to further isolate.
Mhm.
We're going to try to break that isolation and embrace. When we see kids showing signs of these mental health issues, we're going to report to someone who can intervene and help. We've got to make this a community response. And then social media. I mean, Dominic, you saw it
It's
during I mean, during
unreal.
COVID, if you started to type the word CO, a COVID alert would pop up. And
Right.
sometimes I think I wasn't even going to write COVID. I was
Mhm.
going to write color, but
Right.
they were able to track it. We need social media to help us. We need
Mhm.
help tracking these posts, alerting immediately, removing when necessary. And we need our kids to be doing the same, because it's creating silos where these kids can post and get feedback and
Yeah.
get encouragement and find people who think like them and encourage them to do the unthinkable.
Yeah. And unless you have and have fostered that kind of relationship with your child, I can say you'll never get in. And so these dialogues that we're talking about, and it's so unfortunate that we have to infiltrate as young as we do. Our
I
poor
know.
children are exposed to so much adult content at such an early age that their wiring and their brains are completely incapable of handling and processing what it is that we're asking them to handle and process. And until everybody stops getting a child a phone or getting them on some kind of a digital device and not exposing them to these things, which is an impossibility at this
Yeah,
point, by the way, an
it is.
impossibility.
It is.
So the conversations have to happen early. These
Mhm.
dialogues have to be fluid. And can I say that if a child is struggling in any way or expressing feelings of sadness, isolation, bullied, feeling left out, the pressure, Rania, the pressure on these kids today to perform in every way, to perform academically, perform socially, to be this type of a student, to get to the next level, it's overwhelming. I wouldn't want to be a kid today, but I can tell you this, if I start spotting trouble, I will be the first to get help for my child. And that's where we
Absolutely.
need to be.
I was reading an interesting stat. In 2019, 13% of adolescents reported having major depressive episodes.
Yep.
That's a 60% increase from 2007. And it's all tied to what you're saying. This.
Yep.
People ages 10 to 24, suicide rates leaped nearly 60%.
Mhm.
60%. One of the things we talk about is having the conversations young, because you just said they're exposed at a young age, and they really are. And I love the fact that you said whether you give them a phone or some other way to connect, because we go talk to parents. I'll go talk to parents all the time, and they'll say, well, listen, wait a minute, wait a minute. I'm not letting my child have a phone until they're 8th grade or 9th grade. I say, okay, that's
Mhm.
fine. I mean, I don't judge people, by the way, that have technology. It's the world we live in. I don't judge it at all.
Mhm.
And I don't judge kids who spend time online. That's my whole thesis. My thesis is very different. But I'll follow up the question with the parents and say, well, that's great, but do they have an iPad? Oh, yeah, they've had an iPad since they were 5 or 6 years old. And I'll
Mhm.
say, but they can access the same content. Even in games like young games tailored for really young kids, there still becomes violent content. They can still have communications with people you don't know. They can still be exposed through ads that come by while they wait. If you haven't paid for the game, for example, ads that come by. So if you feel like your child is too afraid for the conversation, then you really have to cut all technology out of their lives. That means no phone, no iPad, no Kindle, no Chromebook through school, no PlayStation.
Yeah. Good luck.
And good luck. Good
Good luck.
luck. Good luck. I was just talking to a colleague of mine who, to separate her child, was having some major issues. And she said, we realized that in order to truly separate a child from all the technology, they sent her to a wilderness-based boarding school.
Yeah.
That's the only way. It's not realistic. So
No.
how do we navigate it, but making sure our kids are staying safe and we're paying attention to their changes in mental health, changes in behavior.
Right. And it's that conversation has to happen. Those dialogues have to happen. And it just means as parents, we've got to be in tune with our children and what they're being exposed to, and especially sensitive to changes that are going on in behavior, in patterns, in sleep, in connection to other students, what grades and performance in school. There are so many markers that can tell us how our children are doing. And I just think that awareness and that conversation is, to me, where it all begins. And like you said, Rania, then there are other steps that we can take. We can then talk to our school. We can then be proactive as parents, strategize, come up with ways, sit down with school boards, come up with better plans, make sure that that everything is updated, like you said. But, what is the first thing that somebody should do to feel empowered? Because I think that that's where everybody feels stuck at the moment. There's all this talk and everybody's saying, vote, you've got to vote. Well, voting happens on specific days every couple of years. But if you're like me, you want to do something right now. You want to feel like you're making a difference. Where do we start?
And that's where I say education. And I always feel like education is almost the overlooked yet most powerful resource. If you take a moment to really educate yourself, at least in your school area, what the policies and procedures are, and figure out what might be missing, or you might realize that your school's on top of it, A+, and you feel that sense of peace to some degree on terms of how the school's responding. The next step is to talk to your children. Our kids today have to, my kids age and range, and I have an elementary school child, and it was and I believe in talking to kids about everything.
Yep.
It was hard for me to talk to the elementary school child about the recent shooting because it's an elementary school and I want to create some distance. You don't want your kids to be afraid, but if you know what's going on in your school district, you can say, listen, you're going to see whether or not mom, dad, whomever talked to you about this. I know you've seen it, you've heard it, you know what's happening. But here's what I want you to know. We've checked your school. These are the security measures that are in place. We've had conversations with the principals. We've talked to the school law enforcement, the school-based law enforcement. We've talked to the district board. We know what they're planning for security. And guess what? We've raised you to also be the eyes and ears. Your campus has been trained. They know what to report. They know how to report. We're all on the same page. We've been told when there's a child that's an outlier, we're going to watch that child and embrace that child instead of doing what feels so natural, which is to further push them away because we don't understand how to relate to them. This gives parents and children a feeling of we're doing something now. And guess what? Crime Stoppers in Houston has seen that model work because to date, we've removed over 280 weapons before they could ever be used in a school because the community has followed that education model. Yes, we want to vote. Yes, we want to argue. Yes, we want to petition. Fine. But mom and dad, We want to know what to do today. And this is a solution that we see a lot of schools implement, and that really does have positive results.
Do you feel it, when we talk about efficacy and strategy, and maybe it's not one or the other, maybe it's a combination of both, but and it's, you don't want to take away your child's innocence and how they
I
see
know.
school, but
I
at the
know.
same time, maybe having an armed officer at school, or metal detectors, or armed teachers who are trained and prepared, and all of that. I mean, is it a multi-pronged approach here?
It really is. And let me tell you what, it's very difficult. So we, being privileged enough to sit on the board of Safe and Sound Schools, I've had conversations with people across the country really working on school safety. And we've looked at, what if every classroom has the option to barricade the door?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. That's great. It's a bit of a cost, but parents will pay for it. Parents will pay for that, no problem. And it's usually a one-time expense and it lasts many years. But here's the flip side. What if the shooter gets into the
Yeah.
room
Mhm.
and barricades the door? What if there's a fire and the door is barricaded and fire can't get into the room? So that creates a problem. We've looked at metal detectors. Okay, that's a cost, and it's usually a one-time cost and with some maintenance, but it creates delays, a huge backlog with gaining entrance, and schools are ultimately not built like an airport where you're all forced into one point of ingress and egress.
Yeah.
Schools have a front door, a side door, a back door. They have an in-between door for lunch. Kids open a door and let people in. You can throw a backpack in the backyard and go pick it up later and figure out how to throw it in through a window. I mean, think of kids. They're very,
Yep.
very creative with how. So we've gone through the many layers. I personally think law enforcement presence at school is wonderful. And it's been interesting to have this conversation over the last few years where people say, I don't want a police officer at the school. This is a great school. We don't need a police officer at the school. And I think, my gosh, when I grew up, police were community heroes.
Sure.
You'd love to see a police officer. That's not
Mhm.
scary or danger. I mean, that's
It's
like,
protection, to
it's for,
serve and protect.
and it's nothing negative. So we're navigating through that conversation. Teachers who are armed, that's the other one. We have to remember, we're not talking about arming a kindergarten teacher who's not trained. We're talking about arming teachers who usually this is their second career. They were retired law enforcement, retired, then equipped to navigate having a weapon in the classroom, because you have to think, if you're in a classroom with 30 students, you don't want students to gang up on you and be able to grab your weapon or grab it from a desk. But
Yeah.
we talk about all of that and we're thinking through those strategies. It's not easy, but there are a lot of people working on solutions.
And I guess I just want people to understand that there is no overnight solution to this problem. And the conversation that we're having today, Rania, and just to be able to have these steps, and they may seem like small steps, but they're really not. If one foot is put in front of the other, before you know it, you've walked a distance. And I just want people to feel empowered that we can do something until better and bigger strategies are put into place.
Absolutely. And I appreciate we have friends all over the world as well that say, what's wrong with the US? We've had no school shooting. We've never had a school shooting here. And I understand that and I get that. And I hope that's the case forever. But I also know that humans are humans and the world globally is changing and people across the globe are becoming more aggressive and they all have access to the same violent content and online content. So all I can say is, yes, we have a problem in this country, but we're also working aggressively to solve it, whether it is by voting, legislation, community engagement, thinking of strategies, rebuilding schools. There is a strategy to change it. I will say there's an interesting statistic that my sort of brain hovers around all the time. We talk about gun control, and it is important, but the number one way kids are getting guns, if it's not from the home where it's not properly secured, is by stealing them from cars. That's
Absolutely.
gone up 225%, that
Yes.
statistic. So to your point, we've got to have ironclad clad legislation, but then we have to also figure out how to navigate the scenarios where no one's going to pay attention to the laws that
Totally.
are
And
taking place.
You're so right. And that's the crime element. And that was one thing that my son brought up too. He said, Mom, if somebody wants to gain access to something like a gun or drugs, they're going to find a way to get it,
Mhm.
because there are those ways, because there is this dark side of society where these things happen and operate. And so, yes, legislation can take care of one thing, but it doesn't take care of the other. And that's where the community comes in again.
Yes. And what about this? You can go online today and buy a kit and make a gun at home.
Yourself.
We have
Mhm.
3D printers and ghost guns that are real and that take lives. So this is a bigger issue. It's a systemic issue. And it's why I appreciate you starting with the family. Your son's point was dead on. Mental health, community engagement. Those three things are ultimately going to be what solves this problem in the end, in my opinion. And as I said, we're seeing it in real time, at least in Houston, where we're leading. And by the way, if you're in any city across the country, actually, we've gone as far as Europe. We offer our training for free. You take whatever we have as an organization and replicate it in your schools. Everything, we're a nonprofit. Everything we do is there for free, and it's there for you to take to keep your school safe, because we believe it does. The community's coming together, and it has to come together to ensure the safety of our kids and all schools everywhere is what we say.
Absolutely. Every life is deserving, and we all have an opportunity to do something. And even if it is a conversation with our children, with our schools, or with our Heavenly Father, it is most certainly a start. And I appreciate you, Rania, to have this conversation. I'm going to link to Crime Stoppers. I will also link to your book, which I think is a great read for parents.
Thank
Parents
you.
struggle with this, and their children, they struggle. It is so hard raising a child today and keeping them happy and healthy in this overwhelming environment. And I honestly think it's a cultural problem. Our kids, our youth, they feel overwhelmed, and so many of them feel lost and hopeless. And like you said, they feel like this is their chance to feel important in a very sad and sick way, but it's their chance to feel like somebody. And we need to make them feel like somebody all the time for who they are. So I can't thank you enough, Rania.
Dominic, thank you. Thank you for having me and for having this important conversation. And I am available to anyone at any time. We literally work around the clock. People, even this week, have been emailing me from all over the country asking questions, and we're here, we're available. And we thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, my dear. Thanks.